Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to iXBRL webinar. Today we have an exciting topic which will be of much more importance to ESEF filers. We will be talking about the latest addition to the mandate, which is text block tagging. We have our in-house expert here, so I will shortly introduce her. We also will be covering about a quality study which our team does every year. So we have just published our ESEF quality study for 2021, where we analyze annual reports from various filers and find out what were the major errors and mistakes which they have done, and share some tips and tricks which you can utilize to avoid them in your 2022 filing. So today I have Shraddha Bagul with me. She is our XBRL expert and customer success manager for Europe. She's one of our XBRL domain experts. She's been with iXBRL for over 10 years now. She has worked with regulators and enterprises for over a decade now. She has been instrumental in establishing our work with regulators such as SSM, Malaysia, Accra, Singapore, and CBRD Mauritius. She has also helped enterprise and partner companies adopt XBRL across US, Malaysia, Singapore, and Mauritius. So it's my pleasure to welcome Shraddha. Shraddha, over to you.
Thanks, Vivek, for the nice introduction. Hello and welcome everybody for today's webinar. So I think as Vivek mentioned, today's webinar will be focusing more on the ESEF quality analysis of 2021 reports, as well as we'll be presenting you the new mandate, which is block tagging of notes, much in detail, and understand the practical capabilities and its illustrations as well. So moving on with the first set of topic, which I would like to present to you, is on the block tagging of notes. So let's see what exactly is a new mandate all about, right? So I can just, So block tagging of notes that was introduced lately by the ESEF mandate in July 2022, which has a number of requirements, right? So talking about the guideline, we need to understand what are the typical things that as an issuer has to understand and make sure that their filing for 2022 goes very smooth. So talking about block tagging of notes, it will be mandated from 1st Jan 2022 reports onwards. So when we talk about block tagging of notes, the guideline, which is 1.9, lists down the requirements that every issuer or company has to comply with. So we'll go one by one in detail and try to understand how exactly this entire process or mandate requirement will work. So the guideline 1.1 specifically talks about marking up notes and accounting policy. So as you can see on the screen on your right-hand side, it's the detailed notes to consolidated financial statements, which may have all the significant notes, such as, for example, if there are in the annual report, the company has around 1 to 50 notes. So all the 1 to 50 notes should be captured as a single block of text. That is the first set of requirement, wherein if you see the header, notes to the consolidated financial statement needs to be tagged to a concept from the ESEF taxonomy, which will be disclosure of notes and other explanatory information, which will capture all your notes to accounts. Going forward then, every note within the consolidated financial statement needs to be captured as a unique text block item, which means here every note, say note 1, which talks about accounting policy, note 2, which talks about finance income, finance cost, should be separately tagged to a unique concept from the ESEF taxonomy. That is the next level of reporting. And the third one is within the accounting policy, you may have n number of accounting policies that a company may disclose. Say, for instance, basis of presentation, inventory, right, adjustments, or adoption of new standard. All these, each and every policy within the significant accounting policy also needs to be tagged separately. So this is how the granular level of reporting or the granular level of text block tagging has to be done by each issuer going forward. So this is one set of requirement. The next set of requirement, we need to understand more on the granularity of block tagging. By taking the example of this particular note, where you can see it talks about finance income and cost, wherein if you see here, on the table, it talks about income as well as cost. So here the issuer has to understand they need not tag each and every row and column information separately, but they need to capture the entire table as one block of text, considering the entire gist of the table as per the accounting meaning. So for instance, here note 2 talks about finance income and cost. So the tag which we need to apply to this particular table should be a combination of finance income as well as cost, which you can pull up from the ESEF taxonomy. Further to that, you can narrow down the concepts to the individual level, wherein you can represent that it also talks about the finance income and finance cost. This is how the granular level of reporting caters to the block tagging of notes as per guideline 1.9.2. Now, what are the things that we need to understand from the block text tagging? Firstly, we need to understand from where I can get the list of items that I need to choose for tagging the block tagging of note. So as per the mandate, what they have listed is that all the issuer has to follow the Annexure 2 of RTS to use the text block taggings defined within that particular disclosure. If that particular concept is not available in Annexure 2, they may have an option to go ahead and use the elements defined in Annexure 4. And say, for instance, a company has a unique note which is there in the annual report. They have an option to create a custom concept or an extension to define and tag a particular text block. So these are the things that we need to carefully look for and apply it in our 2022 annual reports. Another few things that we also need to understand from the text block tagging, which is again a new different guideline altogether, where if the information is defined multiple places within the entire annual report, that every single information has to be defined to a single block of text. And that kind of a linking has to be done with the help of continuation and concatenation guideline as defined as Annexure 1.9.3. I know that this looks a bit kind of a complex in nature, how entire process will work from the issuer side, how are we going to tackle these scenarios. But of course, the need is that the software vendors has to consider these all set of guidelines and make sure their software is available and ready to be used for the next set of filing. So where do you find the text block tags in the ESEF taxonomy? As I mentioned earlier, this is a link where you can see all the list of concepts that can be used for text block tagging, where you can see the first set of 10 to 12 items are on the mandatory list. And going forward, you can see all the list of text block tags that can be used as a preference to do the block tagging. From the review aspect also, what as a kind of an auditor or as a company user, they need to take care. So as we understood or learned from the last year filings as it was mandated, the XBRL output, the iXBRL output should be human readable in nature, and it should identically replicate your annual report. Same is the case with the block tagging, like it should be mirror image your annual report. It should be exactly same. The look and feel should be exactly same as you see in the annual report of a company. So as per, there are like a different guidelines that we need to understand and cater to the human readable output, which is also defined in the user manual that has been released lately. And every elements that has been used to define the block tagging should be reviewed properly as per the Annexure 2 of the RTS. So these are the few tips that we need to understand and make sure that we use it for the further compliance process. Now let's try and understand how exactly this will look like when we talk about the illustrate or the block tagging of notes. So here is a few examples that I have tried to, made it simpler to make you understand. So this is the first instance where if you see there is a notes to a consolidated financial statements, and within that you will have n number of notes that can be defined. So for the first level of header is what you will need to capture the entire notes to a concept, which is disclosure of notes and other explanatory information explanatory. The second one, the granular level of tag, which we need to apply to respective individual note, is going to be the disclosure of general information about financial statements. This is just an example, wherein you can see note 1, note 2, note 3. You can pick up an appropriate concept available from the taxonomy and apply to this entire disclosure. The understanding from the granular level of reporting, like level 1 or level 2, or we can say, the headers and then the narrow concept, then the narrow concept. This is a classic example which will make us understand clearly, where we can see there is a significant accounting policy note, which has around like 10 policies together. First of all, we need to tag the entire heading of the policies together with all the 10 policies with the one accounting policy note or the concept, which is disclosure of summary of significant accounting policy explanatory. Further to that, if you see, we have tagged individual policies separately. And if you see, the color coding for the header and the subsequent one is a bit different. So the level you go deeper, the color coding changes. That is again a kind of a rendering mechanism that we have defined so as to understand the users till what granular level of reporting the company would like to do. So this is how the multi-level tagging will look going forward in future for your 2022 annual reports. So this was all about the block tagging that has been introduced lately and how the issuers we need to cope up, how the software vendors need to understand, how the auditors will take this entire process, and how the auditing will be done on these set of text block tagging. Now, another topic that I would like to present to you is more on the quality analysis that we done on the 2021 ESEF documents. So this study was also done last year, and we have already shared this kind of study in all our presentations last year as well. A kind of a sampling study that we have done last year was based on 447 companies, out of which 176 companies had error-free filings. And the errors and warnings were pretty much high during the last year, as it was voluntary phase, as it was the first, phase of filing. And some people did voluntary as well. Few countries were mandatory to be done. A few countries, it was like a voluntary-based filing. In 2021, we also did the same kind of study, but with the help of large group of samples. So if you see here in 2021, we reviewed across 1,760 companies, out of which the error-free filings were 859. And the quality review came up to errors were around 14,000 and warnings were around 30,000 plus. So this is kind of an interesting analysis which I would like to share and exchange the information.
So just a second, just to jump in here. If anybody has any questions on block tagging, I can see a lot of people are on this webinar. Please use the question option. You can just post your question there. We will be answering it at the end of the webinar. Thank you. Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Vivek. So the process that we followed to analyze these set of annual reports or the iXBRL filings is that we identified few set of companies which we pulled from the filings.xbrl.org website, wherein all the list of companies who have complied with their 20 million filings are already being available. We just downloaded the iXBRL files from the website, validated using our in-house validator, which caters to the ESEF guidelines and as per the latest conformance suit. We validated those documents and we ran validation checks. During the validation checks process, we understood what types of errors the companies has done it or what were the mistakes, and we drilled down further to as a warnings, severity into warnings, errors, and also we understood a detailed analysis was done on the extensions that were created by a few companies. So going into the deep understanding, we just need to understand the scope. What was the scope of the study? The scope was to analyze around 1,760 companies, which were spread across 27 industries. The concepts that these companies had overall was 210,000 plus, and extension concepts were 1,900. And mainly all these companies were falling under the large caps, mid caps, small caps, and fewer we were unable to identify. So this was the entire study. Based on that study, and we did a comparison study with the last year, it was seen that the number of companies who committed mistake was majorly seen this year in France, followed by UK and then Denmark. But the interesting study we also got to know was in Germany, which was last year it was mandatory. In Austria, where it was mandated, the errors or the mistakes that we can see, it's like a shift. It was earlier, the last year it was 86, whereas in this year it has lowered down to 12. Same case in Austria. So I think we can see a progression here. The early you adopt, the better you become in future. So this is a kind of a study. It's interesting to know and share across as well. This was the number of companies who did mistakes in their filings. Now we also did a kind of a quality country-wise analysis. So wherein, if you see around these were the set of countries that we analyzed, the number of companies that we reviewed. Out of those companies, how many companies had mistakes and what are the company and the percentage of mistakes. In a nutshell, if you see, we analyzed across 22 countries. The companies were the same, 1,760, and the errors that we noticed was 890. And you can see that the percentage of errors are keep on increasing. It is still not been able to match up to the near possible than zero. So these were the set of findings. Country-wise analysis is what we have been doing as well. Now, very interesting to know is that if you are in the UK and EU region, industries are scattered. And if you want to understand the analysis based on industry-wise classification, and they would like to know how many errors that a particular industries has done, it is very, very possible, very much possible to see that. So you can see from here is that the highest number of mistakes or the errors that we can notice is from the financial industries, followed by the industry. Now, why these set of industries has a major number of errors? Because the complexity of the disclosures, the complexity of the line items that they have, and the more complex the report, the creation of extension, the understanding of the label, the language, and this all caters to kind of an n number of errors in the filings. So let's now understand what exactly are the mistakes that we try to identify in these particular analysis study. Now, in a nutshell, if you see, as I earlier mentioned, there were errors across 14,000 and warnings around 30,000. Generally, we have divided or bifurcated these errors into different categories just to make us understand what exactly the errors are, and they are classified accordingly. So there are Extension Taxonomy Guideline, there are technical errors that we have noticed, whereas in warnings, calculation inconsistency, label guideline errors, and warnings and taxonomy packages. Now this is a general overview of the errors that we have seen so far on this 1,700 companies quality report. So if you see here, this is a detailed list of the categories of errors that we have identified, and we have grouped them logically. So if you see here, the first error or the major type of error that we have seen is in the Extension Taxonomy Guideline. Now what this Extension Taxonomy Guideline error talks about? This mainly covers the schema related errors, if you have not assigned a balance type, or if there are taggings or the concepts not present in the presentation link base of the extended taxonomy. Followed by there are technical errors, so wherein there are hidden facts, or there are references given to the external document, there are a set segment to scenario, and such kind of things are considered as a technical errors. So this is how the entire picture of errors looks like, and this is how we have distinguished. Similarly, we have done it for the warnings as well. So warning also, the major thing or the major category that falls under warning is the calculation inconsistency. This has been observed in across all the major types of filings. Then we have some label guidelines errors that were also not complied with. And then we have taxonomy guidelines where the LCD convention was not met. They were abstract concepts present in the taxonomy which were not yet allowed to be done. And then you have some taxonomy packages errors, missing mandatory elements, and so on and so forth. So this was the study and the overview that we have seen on the warning report. Now from the entire analysis, what were our key findings? As a kind of a third person, what were our understanding and findings, and what we would like to recommend that people should avoid going forward for their future filings? On the analysis that we have understood was the average extension rate that was used was 15%, which is quite high. And the extension was majorly seen in the insurance industry, followed by the financial industry. Again, I mentioned that in insurance and financial industries are very typical in nature. They have many custom concepts. So that's why the highest rate of extensions are in these two set of segments. Now, during the ESEF filings that we also noticed was on the PDF format that was shared with us. So generally, all the PDF reports should be in a searchable format, and there should not be any external references that should be defined in the annual report. There were some formatting issues, text overlapping issues that should have been avoided, and every software vendor should make sure that their reporting manual and conformance suite is updated in their software. From the auditor standpoint also, it is very required that they share the audit report well in advance with the clients so that they can integrate that in their iXBRL document. And of course, one more thing which is important is to make sure issuer does the test filing before at least 1 week ahead of the publication. So these are the few key findings that we had on the ESEF 2021 filings done so far. If you have any questions, you can please ask us, drop us in the Q&A segment, and we will be happy to share our thoughts on that.
Thank you, Shraddha. Thank you for the fantastic introduction of the ESEF quality study as well as text box tagging. We have few questions coming in, so I will drop it one by one. The first question is, do companies need to tag the auditor report?
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
Do companies need to tag the auditor report?
No. So companies are not required to tag the audit report in the text block tagging phase because it's not part of your notes to accounts. It clearly talks about the text block tagging should be applicable for notes to accounts only.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. The second question is about duplicate errors, which is how to tackle duplicate errors while tagging page by page.
Yeah. So this is an interesting question. So, we have been facing this scenario as well. But now, if you see the monster tag, as we said, notes to accounting policy or notes to the financial statements, that is a tag that needs to be applied throughout the entire notes to accounts. So wherein you have to keep on repeating the same tag again and again till your entire disclosure is over, right? There you will get a duplicate error while tagging. So here, as per the mandate, these duplicates errors will be considered as warning. These will not be considered as an error. So that is kind of a KV, that is kind of considered as a warning, and it should be okay for the filers to do that.
Got it. Thank you so much. Next question is how to deal with changes in the content of the notes while the rest are block tagged.
Again, a kind of a very genuine question because these are like the last minute changes that happens in the annual report filing phase is where, the text changes again and again. How do we handle that in the text block tagging scenario, right? So say, for instance, you have already tagged a particular note, which is around like 2-4 paragraph. And going forward, when there is a kind of a small update from the companies, and there is like a few changes in that paragraph. So for that purpose, what we can do, we can just change that particular paragraph, retaining all the respective tags to the other statements. We will just change that particular paragraph and re-tag the information again. So that is how it can be handled. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. There are two more questions. One is, are values within notes presented as paragraphs required to be tagged?
So if I get that correct, so you are saying that the paragraph in the paragraph information, if there are any fact values, are they required to be tagged, right?
Yes, that's right.
So again, like in the block text tagging, if the requirement is to tag only the block of text, the content within that block of text is not a kind of a requirement right now, which will come up in the detailed tagging of the notes, right? Which is again a kind of a requirement that may come up in future. But right now, the fact value presented in the paragraphic information should not be tagged.
Got it. Yeah. And the last question, which is a very interesting question, will there be any relaxation for the block tagging mandate?
I think everybody's expecting that there has to be some relaxation because it's kind of too complex in nature. But unfortunately, there are no news on the relaxation right now. It is still, it is being set mandatory, so every issuer has to comply that. So, we have to get ready and be prepared for the next level of reporting for the 2022.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shraddha. Thank you so much for the insightful session. We have come to an end of this short webinar. I hope all the attendees have got value out of it and are prepared for their ESEF filing ahead with all the necessary requirements of block tagging, etc. Thank you so much for attending this today's iXBRL webinar. So we will be bringing more webinars in the near future. If you want to reach out to us, if you need any help with ESEF filing, etc., just go to our website, www.iriscarbon.com, or you can reach out to our email, info@iriscarbon.com, and we will make sure one of our experts will be with you shortly. Thank you so much for taking time out. Have a great ESEF filing season and have a great day ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.